Hey guys, welcome back to Honey in the Rock episode 68. I'm Sophie, and I have a returning guest.
Oh yeah.
This is Mary Louise.
Hi guys.
We just recorded an episode on her podcast, The Yes Project, so make sure you go follow her and listen to it. It was so fun. We just talked about to be where God has placed you right now, especially in the season that we're experiencing of going to college, and not wishing this time away in high school, but just to use up the opportunities that God has given us. Right here and right now.
Right.
So this is, like I just said, she's on this her second one. It was about a year ago. So if you want to hear her longer testimony, you can go to that episode or go find her podcast. She shared her testimony on her podcast as well.
Full thing there.
So make sure you go listen to that. But you guys know I like to share the testimony, so she's gonna give her testimony really fast before we get started and talk about Christmas, because it's almost Christmas.
So I grew up in a very traditional church, and it wasn't really until I was in middle school that I realized I've always felt close to the Lord, but it wasn't until middle school that I was like, okay, this is for me too.
Right.
And so I always wanted to be a teacher growing up, and I was like, that's definitely what I'm gonna do. Sorry, y'all. I'm just gonna do this because it's gonna annoy me all day.
She's tucking
so that's gonna look weird, but it's fine. But I always wanted to be a teacher, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And then I remember being on my knees one night, or actually at church, and I was on my knees, and I was like, Lord, and I just felt the Lord being like, hey, you can do this, and you can be a teacher, and you can be good at it, and you would be great, but I have something better for you. You just gotta trust me. And I was like, all right. I was like, looks like I'm trusting you. And it was at that time that I really kind of decided, okay, I feel like I'm being called to ministry. And so I decided then that I was gonna go into ministry. I didn't really know what that meant. I still don't know what that means all the time, but I just know that it means I'm talking about the Lord all the time, and I love it. Even though it scares me sometimes. I started, so my, coming into the Lord and my personal relationship with the Lord, and my dad is an alcoholic, so super weird family dynamic. It started really getting bad in middle school, and so it was crazy because God kind of was shifting all these things in my life at the same time, and I decided, okay, I need to go into ministry, and then a lot of stuff with my dad went down, and I just kind of found myself, my dad and I were super close, so I found myself feeling like I didn't have that father figure anymore.
Right.
And so God, obviously, being Abba, Father, came in. It was like, hey, I'm your father. I am yours and you are mine. And it was just this really sweet thing. And although there's been so many ups and downs, and I still don't have a great relationship. We don't really have a relationship anymore because of his alcohol problems. It's been just this really sweet journey in a way. I wouldn't wish it on anybody because the gift of an earthly father is amazing, but it's taught me so much about forgiveness and the fact that you can forgive somebody and not invite them back into your life in the same
still have boundaries.
way. Yes. And I never knew that you could do that, especially being a Christian. I think that some people look down on that, and it's no, the Bible says, if you have a problem with somebody, talk to them one-on-one, then bring them in with a group, and then if it still doesn't work, and bring them to the church. If it still doesn't work, it's okay to not have that person in your life, and especially when it's abusive and that toxic relationship. And it wasn't even until, I always knew that God was my father, but this really sweet adoption process almost of me and God as him being my father, my dad almost, which sounds kind of weird, but I found something else out about my dad that just really was close to my heart, because in middle school I dealt with some intrusive thoughts of killing myself, and I never did, obviously, but I never did anything about it, because I didn't want to, it was fear, really, just and honestly it was spiritual warfare because I was in a very vulnerable place in my life. I was a baby. I didn't really know what I was doing, and so I was why am I thinking this? I don't want to be thinking this. And so I had a situation with my dad that was similar in a totally different way, but it was like circling around the same issue.
Right.
And it devastated me and it made me so upset. And I remember that day, and it just like allowed a lot of fear in me. And I remember that night I was crying out to the Lord physically. And I was like, God, I'm so scared I'm gonna do some of the same things that he does. Like I'm scared about generational sin. Like I'm scared of all these things. And my dad is still alive and well. Like don't be thinking that, but
don't be thinking that.
But I was like, I'm scared, and God really just like placed over me and over my heart the words like, "Hey, like your DNA is in me. Like your actual genetic makeup is my genetic makeup. Like I have chosen you. You are my daughter." Like in that moment, and like that's not to say like if you do like a paternity test, it's gonna be like. God, like no, but really like just adoption, like God is my father, like he's my heavenly father, but he is my father, and so just that really sweet of being like, hey, like I'm gonna be that thing for you.
Yeah.
So
if you know my story, it's kind of crazy how similar our story.
Like, they are very similar. Yeah.
Like I have our dad's situation is not the same, but like a lot of our situation is so similar, and also like what the Lord has placed in our hearts is really similar, and so. She said it earlier, but like it really has been sweet to have somebody to walk alongside with in this journey, and just like be able to have conversations to be like, do you feel this? Do you ever, like this whole like spiritual warfare thing? Do you like, or do you feel afraid? Do you feel scared? So it's just so sweet to like have somebody walking on this journey as well. Okay, so like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about Christmas, and really just how to keep Christ in Christmas, and like I said, be where we are. But what's your favorite Christmas tradition?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so
I kind of put you on the spot.
Yeah, now I gotta think about that.
Okay, I'll tell my favorite Christmas tradition.
Yeah, you go first.
We go, all of the cousins on my mama's side. My mama. Hey, mama. All of the cousins on my mama's side, we all go and spend the night at her house on Christmas Eve. Okay. And then we like go bowling and we play with her, like play there. And then all of our parents come on Christmas Eve to her house.
Oh, that's sweet.
And then we do Christmas Eve at my grandma's house, and it's so fun. Awesome. All the cousins together.
Okay, so mine probably is on Christmas morning. My cousins, they do Christmas morning, like the presents and all that stuff at their house, and then we do it at my house. But then they come over to my house, and my grandma has this. She passed, but she has this recipe of like this strawberry Danish situation. Yeah, and it's like it's a strawberry popover, which I don't know if that translates to anybody. But it's just like it is like a Danish situation, and it's so funny because they'll come over and my mom will make it and we'll do like our Christmas like together, and it's just really sweet. And my cousins are more like my siblings. Like if people ask me how many siblings you have, like I'll be like 3. I'll be like I have an older brother and 2 younger sisters. And it's just really sweet because we've just grown up together and we've always done life together. Like during COVID, like they had COVID during Christmas, but we still like we went outside and we like were by their window and like they were there and like we were there, but it was like kind of weird.
Cousins are so special.
Oh, they're the best. I could talk about my cousins forever and I would never get bored.
Sweet. Okay. I just love Christmas. And okay, this is like kind of a trail thought, but I think traditions are something that are really important. Yeah. But I also think that if you're like thinking so much about the act of traditions, it can get you like bogged down and get you off of what the main focus of Christmas. Right. And so like I literally cried one time on Christmas because my mom didn't make the same coffee cake that we have every single Christmas morning. That's because she didn't realize how much apparently I meant. Because it's like something my dad did since he was a kid. And so I was so bogged down with the tradition that once that tradition was taken away, I literally couldn't function, which is so dramatic. Like there goes my emotions. But like when it becomes so quote unquote important, and then it's like actually that's not really doing good. But traditions are sweet, just like make memories. And do fun things, like make fun memories. Like God is the creator of fun, and so like of course, do the fun things. But then I think that kind of goes into what Romans 8:25 says. But if we look forward to something we don't have yet, we must wait patiently and confidently. And I think that's kind of what we're doing with Jesus. And so obviously Jesus is first coming as a baby in such a humble way. Oh yeah. Like if you think about like he was born in a manger. Right. They didn't even have a place for him in the inn. Like
Right.
So humble.
And we were talking about that humble like idea
Yeah.
in the episode that Sophie's in the Yes Project, my podcast. And we like the definition of humbleness is having or showing a modest or low estimate of one's self importance.
Right.
And I think it's so crazy that like even God was humble. Like
Right.
and he is like the creator of everything,
yes.
but he came in such a humble way as like a baby,
which is so cool. And thinking like reminding me that I need to be humble. Like if Jesus came in such a humble way, he could have like done this a lot of different ways.
Right.
But this is how he knew it was best, was coming in a manger and being born to this virgin when this like guy who's a carpenter like had to be so confused. And then like with animals, like think of a farm, like that's kind of gross. Like it had to smell bad. Like and so just like such a humble way. I mean, we need to look forward to his second coming when he comes back to pick us all up, because we know that Jesus died on the cross for all of our sins, and he's alive now and well. But waiting patiently and confidently for Jesus to come back. And I think that's something I've just been trying to reflect, like this Christmas season, of like he came in such a humble way. So how can I live humbly? And then also like how can I patiently wait for him to come back for us? So I don't know. It's just like my thoughts. And then how Christmas isn't old news.
Very true.
Sure, like this happened a long time ago. But this is like now news. And it's such good news. And that just like idea of keeping Christ in Christmas. Is just like so important. And like it was good news to the people back then, and it's good news to us now. Because of where we are.
And I think it's so sweet too. One of my favorite things about Christmas, if you hadn't said traditions, I was gonna say this, because I think this year, like I've realized more that Christmas is the one holiday that even if you don't even know who Jesus is, you're singing about him. And I love that, because I can't help but like picture the Lord smiling. Like he obviously knows our hearts and he knows our intentions, so I'm sure he's kind of like, they don't know what they're doing, but they're glorifying me. What are they doing? Like, and like obviously they might not be glorifying him necessarily, but like away in a manger, like Prince of Peace, like all these things, like all these songs and Christmas songs that are like, oh, like the Lord is like coming, and like he's like a baby, and like they talk about all this stuff, and I'm just like, that's awesome. Like that's so good. Like that's so awesome that I can put on a non-Christian like radio and like hear about the Lord. And I was like, and I love that, because it like it, and of course there's like songs that are Christmas songs that have nothing to do with God and Jesus. But like the songs that do make me so happy, because I'm like, I don't even know this person knows God, but I know God, and I know this
God
is so cool.
Using that. Like, that's not really an accidental thing. Like he's using that to work in our hearts and other people's hearts as like a way to start conversations. Which I think is so cool.
I love it.
And that's a really good way to think about it. I didn't even think about that before, but that's a really good way to think about that and see God in everything. Like, oh, like let's see God in this, let's see God through that, and like, like a song, like,
which is so sweet, because I'm like, y'all are singing about Jesus right now. Like, I don't know if you know.
You don't even know.
But you're singing about
I went
Jesus.
Christmas caroling last night.
Oh, that's so
sweet. In my youth group. And we're singing like Joy to the World. And people, the people were singing to us crying. And it's just because like Jesus works like that. Like, it's filling our hearts. And he really is like, if you look at those songs to the Christmas, like Christmassy songs, it's like Joy to the World. Like, he came and like, this is a joyful thing, and he's the creator of joy, and he's the author of joy, and he is joy. Like, it's just so cool to see that. And then like how he's prepared a way for us. Like, so when Jesus came at Christmas, he knew what he was doing. He knew that he was going to come and live this perfect life for like 33 years or something, and honor God through it all. And he knew that he literally knew everything he was going to do, and he still did it. Even though he endured pain through it.
I think
it's just crazy.
So I lead middle school girls, and they're 6th graders, and I love them so much. But they ask super good questions.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're like, what are you talking about? So they ask like questions like you wouldn't think about asking, because like they're so almost like streamlined, but like they're not streamlined. Like, but let me tell you, like these questions hit me, and I'm like, oh, like
okay, good question.
But like they like came to me and they were like, hey, like did Jesus know when he was like an infant that like he was God? And I was like, Well, the Bible talks about how like he grew in knowledge and he grew in wisdom
Right.
and he grew in all these things. So I'm like, he's probably not like some because he was full of human and fully God. So it's like I wasn't some 2-year-old like I'm about to go die on the cross. Like
Right.
give me 31 years and I'll be there, you know?
Right.
But like once he like started like learning who he was and like who his father was and like even in the situations when he was 12 and he was in the temple with all of like the people and he was like okay like with all like the leaders of the church and his parents were like what are you doing and he was like I'm spending time with my father like it shows you like yeah he knew that he was different like but I was like girls let me tell you like I don't know I mean I was like I'm not gonna put the past on this is Jesus but I was like probably not like some like 3-year-old like prophesying like to the kingdom but I was like I mean
but then also he's God.
But I was like,
he's
but
also fully God.
Like, I don't know.
And like the thing about questions like that, it's like it's so good to be processing thinking, but then also it's not like a first-hand issue.
Right.
You know, it's like either way, it's okay. We know that he lived this perfect life. And so whether he knew that he was God from the moment, like if he has a big brain or something, where he's like born, like, okay, he knew he was God, or if he like slowly learned into his role that who he was and what authority he had, like either way, we know that he lived this perfect life. And he came in such a humble way. And I've been reading a chapter of Luke each day, and you've been reading something else each day. So I want to talk about that a little bit. But for me, to keep Christ just like at the center of Christmas, not get boggled down by the fun like gifts or traditions or go see Christmas lights or like all these little things that are so fun. And I think God created for this like fun thing. But just to remind myself to keep Christ in the middle of Christmas, I've just been reading Luke each day, and like I have so many thoughts from it. Especially like reading a story that's like I know how God was born. Like I know that they're like we're gonna kill him, and then like they didn't kill him. You know, like I you might know these stories if you grew up in church, but just like the importance of being reminded of them, and focusing on them. And it's been really good. Like aside from my regular study that I attempt to do every day, I get to read a chapter of Luke each day, which just like sets the tone of Christmas. Because I don't want a little bit of what we were talking about on Mary Louise's podcast, that this idea of like wishing away where you're right now, or not even focused on what's happening right now because you're so worried about the future. But kind of like that through Christmas season, it's like I can't wait for Christmas Day to wake up and get presents. It's like actually no, like let's think about right now. Like Mary would be pregnant right now, and or let's just like think about the story of Jesus, because then when Christmas is over, it's kind of like, oh, it's over. But how can I like make good use of this season right now to be a light for Jesus? This is a really good opportunity to tell people about God during this Christmas season.
Like, and I think also it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, like it's you can almost like be like, oh, I love the Christmas season, and then Christmas Day, like after the presents, it kind of gets depressing because you're like,
all this work up for this Amazon gifts,
exactly. So it's like it's over, but it's like, but when you like shift your focus and your perspective to keeping your eyes on Jesus, like every day can be like Christmas, you know, and it's like. I think that's so cool that like we serve a God that can make every day like Christmas. And like we think about like all like the songs like Joy to the World, like Jesus was born obviously on Christmas, and like well, I don't actually know if he was born specifically on Christmas Day. Like there's some like weird stuff about that, but that's what we celebrate it. So we celebrate that Jesus was born on Christmas, but it's like one of those things where we're like, okay, he is that joy that was brought to the world, but we live in a post-Jesus society of like Jesus has come and he's died for us, and like we have that joy right now every single day, and like that's so awesome. That doesn't mean that like bad things aren't going to happen, or like we're not going to struggle, we're not going to have issues, but it does mean that this joy to the world that was brought to us around Christmas, like we get to experience that joy every single day, and that is so awesome. And like through Advent and like through this season of like Christmas, two things. One, we were kind of learning about like that the first kind of week of Advent is all about like hope, and like this beginning is about hope.
We do that at church, like you light candles.
We talk about it, and I love that, and I love that it's about hope, because I think that we live in a world that just loses hope all the time. Like,
oh my goodness,
things don't go our way. If it's years, like I'm reminded of this story that's in Genesis in the very beginning, and it's about one of the sons of Jacob, and I always blank on his name, but I know, like I've told the story a million times, but I just always blank on the name. It'll come to me, so but pretty much he was sold into slavery, and by all his brothers, he had 12 brothers. He was one of the 13 brothers. No, there was 12 brothers. He was the 11th. I don't know. He was one of them. He wasn't the 11th, but he was in the line.
In the middle, yeah.
And he, I think it was, I always get so bothered by this. I think it was like somebody. It was
I don't know.
It really does bother me when I can't like remember this because like I do know it. Like I've read this story so many times. But long story, Jacob. I know it's a Jacob.
Hey, Jacob.
But it was Jacob, and he got sold into slavery, and he ended up. Long story short, he ended up in jail for a while. He like made his way up, and the Lord was with him. And then he ended up in jail for 13 years, and like this long number. And it's like we think about that, and I'm like, I've been going through my stuff with my dad for over 6 years, and it's like I'm like, all right, I'm getting tired of this. Like, let's go. But he's got double on me, and like he was not like. He was still faithful with the Lord and like had that joy and that hope. With him. And like that's so sweet because I think that it's so easy to lose hope. But like this Christmas season is such a good reminder of like, no, like have hope in these things. Like have hope in the Lord. Like kind of what we were talking about in my podcast episode, like pray with anticipation that like that God is gonna follow through.
Right.
But the second thing is that I've been reading through Isaiah chapter 9. And I promise I know how to read. I am illiterate, but I've just been going through each verse, like specifically in that chapter, because it's just been so interesting. Like what the Lord's been showing me. And the verse I'm actually going through today, which is so cool, is Isaiah 9:5, and it's for a child is born to us, a son is given to us. Upon his shoulders dominion rests. They name him Wonder Counselor, God, Hero, Father forever, Prince of Peace. And I think that is so cool. I think that is so good. Because just the names that they give, it says for a child, like they give him these names like Wonder Counselor, like God, Hero, Father forever, Prince of Peace. And I think that all of those things, if you think about the things that people are going through in their lives, each one of those things could line up with one of them. Like for me, Father forever is like, Amen, that's my thing. Like I love that. But for somebody else, they might need guidance and Wonder Counselor. Like that's amazing. You're like they need saving, God, Hero. Like they need like this inner peace, like Prince of Peace. Like he fulfills every single need and desire of the human heart just by being himself.
And the idea of hope of like if Jesus didn't come at this Christmas time, like obviously we don't know exactly what day. Like if Jesus didn't come at this Christmas time, if Jesus wasn't born, we would have no hope. If Jesus wasn't born and then lived this sinful life, and then the whole idea of the gospel, and then was crucified on a cross, which is the worst way to die, it's terrible. And then rose again 3 days later and lives forever at the right hand of God, and guides us and creates us, and all of these things, we would have no hope. And what's the point of life if you don't have hope? And like. Yeah, like literally, what's the point of doing things? What's the point of going through hard things if you don't have hope? And we have hope because of this baby that was born on Christmas. And like, what a celebration that is. I also wrote down that verse, like Isaiah 9:5, 9:6. But then I think what my study in Luke keeps pointing out to me is what it looks like to be still and what it looks like to be silent. And I just like kept reading stories of like, okay, Jesus did this, and then he went to a desolate place and prayed. It's like, how often do I go to a place alone to pray? And not like, sure, like I pray in my car a lot, but is that a silent place? Not really. There's a lot of noise happening. I'm still thinking about where I'm going. Like, how often am I going to a silent place to pray? And so I think that's been really staying out to me. And then like, obviously the song Silent Night, like this night, like could have been so silent. Like just imagine the silence of it when he was born, but also the silent night of when he was crucified. Like it went dark. And so just to be still and I know we keep talking about what we talked about on her podcast as well, but to go back, make sure you listen the full story. But what's sweet about it is like during this Christmas season, like slow down. Like it's gonna go by fast. Like if you're a mom to kids, like slow down. Like eventually they're gonna be grown. Or if you're in the teenager, you just slow down. Like enjoy being home Enjoy what the Lord is doing through this season. And so I think for me, it's just been like, have I been silent? Like, have I stopped talking and just listened to God? Have I been still enough to hear what He has said? Have I, is my soul magnifying the Lord? And then there I had a verse about it somewhere. But anyway, it's just like the stillness of God and the importance just to slow down during this season, which I think people are like, holiday seasons are so crazy. Like, why are we making it crazy? Because I think that's kind of a little bit of a choice. Like, and obviously, I know that like some things you have to do. But like, sure, from Thanksgiving to Christmas, it's crazy. It's Thanksgiving, this, and then exams, and oh my goodness, like so much. But like, we still have time to slow down. Like, strip things away that aren't a priority. Like,
and I think that also it's really sweet that like, so my natural like human tendency would be to be super loud, and you can ask anybody.
Me too. So
like, like my flesh desire is to be the loudest person in the room, like to have that like attention, like whatever. And that's not good. That's not a good thing. But the thing that I think, yes, it can be a blessing, but and whatever. But I think that and I've been very humbled from that, like, and don't do that as much anymore. Like, I don't really need to do that anymore. But I think what the Lord's been kind of speaking through that is like, hey, like, can you be, and even if it's not because I think I don't struggle as much with being the loudest person in the room anymore, but I don't want to be that necessarily, but I still want to have my voice be heard. And I think that God's kind of been asking me, okay, well, Mary Louise, can you, like, what does it look like if instead of you talking, you listen? And I think that that's so sweet, because I think that sometimes I think it's also like just like the position that I'm in, because I like want to be a speaker, like I want to do all these things, and I'm like, I got all these ideas in my head, like I want them to come out, and it's like, no, but like, wait, like that, just because you have great ideas does not mean that she doesn't have great ideas, or he doesn't have great ideas, or whatever. Like, it's one of those moments of, okay, well, can you listen before you speak? Like, can you be a listener before you're a talker? Like, can you humble yourself enough to know that you don't have the authority that God has, and like, He's speaking to everybody, and like, I might not be in the same way. Like, you might be the person who sees a frog and is like, oh my gosh, God is telling me something. Or you might be the person that like literally has to like, okay, I need to feed myself like through the word. Like, I can't just like look at the sky and be like, oh, that's like God, because blah blah blah, And so I think it's really sweet in like the slowing down and being like, okay, well, how can I personally slow down? And I think recognizing what you, like, me and some of my best friends have been like, I think over high school, have just been like recognizing what our problems are, and then being like, okay, well, how can we hand those over to God? And I think in the time of Christmas and like big seasons, those problems get magnified, because it's so much easier for them to come out, because like it's a big thing going on. And so it's like in those moments, like, how can we let go of ourselves, our desires, what we want to do, and instead focus on, okay, God, like, how can I be glorifying God in this way? Like, how can I let God be speaking more than me? And that's hard.
So hard. And that actually was kind of like a little twist on that. But like what we've been saying, just like the idea of how humbly Jesus came. So what does it look like for us to be humble during the season? What does it look like for us to focus on Jesus this season? Cut out all the extra noise that's not necessary. And just to like be still, be silent during the season of Advent. Just like, oh my goodness, like Jesus came as a baby to save the world. But also to recognize that this season can be really hard for people. Like, I mean, if you've lost someone that you love, this is like not a super easy season. Or even just like magnified struggles and insecurities, I think, are just magnified during this season. In Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, who are all who are labored and heavy laden, I will give you rest." And so I think that kind of sticks with the slow down, be still, be silent sometimes, and focus on the Lord. But just like go to Him in that time. Like, go to Him and be like, Jesus, like, not to take away from the power that came at Christmas. Like, oh my goodness, you can still be so thankful that Jesus came in a manger and came to save the world. And acknowledge that you miss the person that you love because of that. And so just like, if that's you, just like, I'm praying for that. I'm praying for all of those who are hurting in this season. But also like, go to God. He says, come to me and He will give you rest. And so don't be like afraid to go to God in this season or feel like you're being a burden to God or a friend, because this is a hard thing, because the people who I love have passed away. Like, this is the time that I'm like, remember when we did that together? Remember when we did this together? Because that's just kind of like the season of traditions and Christmassy, and I know it's hard. And so just like encourage you that like it's okay to also feel down in this fun season.
And also if you're the person who's like, Christmas, like, I love it so much.
Right.
Like, nothing's ever wrong. Like, you're busy. Like,
Right.
that is a perfect verse to also say, like, come to the Lord and He will give you rest. Like, you can also, like, that person who's, like, really, like, busybody, which can sometimes be me, like, you can also find rest in the Lord, like, when you go to Him. And one of my best friends texted me one time after I was going through, like, a dry season.
Yeah.
And was like, hey, how are you resting? And I never thought of that, because I was like, I'm going to go watch TV, like, this will be my rest. Like, but it's like, how are you resting? And sometimes you need to just go take a minute and just sit and watch something that means absolutely nothing.
Right.
But sometimes, like, you got to have that intentional rest of, like, okay, let me rest in the Word. Like, let me rest by listening to this music or this podcast or, like, whatever. And it's like, okay, well, how am I coming to the Lord to get that rest in whatever walk of life or season?
That's so good. And just like the idea that Jesus brings light to all darkness. Whether like for me that was looking like grief and depression and anxiety, but then like God is going to bring a light to whatever darkness that is, and that can be a small thing in your life or a big thing in your life. And then like Jesus came to be the light in the darkness to guide the way, because He is the way and the truth and the light. And so we just sometimes need to be still and look for Him to be that light. Luke 1:78 says, because of the tender mercy of our God, whereby the sunrise shall visit us from high, to give light to those who sit in darkness in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. And so just that, like, once again, peace, once again, hope, this tender mercy of God, where He's here for us, He's merciful to us. And so just like go to Him, He's gonna light the way, especially like in this Christmas season, how like fun it is and sweet it is. Do you have any other thoughts?
Last thought, Isaiah 9, I love it. I'm sorry, I'm really in this right now. But Isaiah 9, I think it's just so sweet because it points to the Lord in the verse that I read earlier. But before that, only 3 verses before that, or 4 verses before that, it talks about how those that were living in darkness have seen a great light. And this is before, if you're just like reading it, you even know that they're talking about Jesus, like the child that's going to be born. But I went through and like looked at like how the verse was talking about people in darkness, and it was the people that were depressed, that were in some dark spaces, they had low spirits, had low hope, had no courage, or lost courage, or lost hope. And we talked about before Advent being the season of hope, and like it just is so sweet that like those are the people who saw a great light. For it, the Bible to then go on and say that Jesus is the light, and then it goes on to also talk about how in Isaiah it talks about how He uses everything, and He uses everything to like greater for the kingdom, and like just as on the days where you were burdened, like He smashed like all those burdens, like so that we could like go. And it says that He like, I love it. He says He shattered those burdens. It's with something shattered, like it's not coming back. Like it's done. And like I think that that's so sweet. How it just keeps pointing, like every single verse keeps pointing back to God's gonna fuel you, God's gonna give you all these things, and then it finally gets to that verse 5 where it says, like I said earlier, like when we're like the child is born to us, and like that is this great light that all these people in darkness saw. So I think that's just super sweet to be reminded of at Christmas.
And like He's the hope for all people, not just those who've got their life together, not just those who've already given their life to Jesus. It's like He is the hope for all people. And so come to Him as you are. It's like the church should look more like a hospital. This beautiful, perfect place, because we're all broken and going. And so just like you don't need to feel like you need to get cleaned up before you go to God, before you just cry out to Him for help. Like just go to God. And I think that's something super easy to do during this Christmas season. Just to be like aware, like I need to go to God. Goodness. Well, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, y'all.
And thank you for coming on.
Of course, I love it.
And make sure you go check out Mary Louise's podcast, The Yes Project. It's so good. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.